Hi guys, it's me Finn, and welcome back to me talking about books for a really questionable amount of time. I'm really happy to declare that it's been a full year since I've been making videos about all of my books that I read each season. The first video I ever made like this was a year ago, last summer, and it's been a full year. And I have had a full year of books up to this point. You can watch all my previous videos if you want to. And I make a lot of other different videos, so you can watch those as well. So let's just get into all the books that I read this summer. Instantly, I would like to say that if you are not interested in me talking about bad books, because I started this video talking about the books that I like the least to the most. So if you just want to hear me talk about books that I really like, you can skip to the end of this video. Like, you can just skip 10 minutes into the books that I actually like, because these first ones have been quite disappointing. That's why they're at the bottom of my list. Also, I've read quite a lot this summer, so this is going to be a pretty long video, I think, and I'm going to try to keep it as quick as possible. Otherwise, I'm going to have to edit like an hour of footage, and I really don't want to do that. The first book is a Latvian book called Actris Ragares, which is about an actress who just finished acting school. And she can't find a job, so instead she goes to work on the countryside. I didn't really like this book. I will just put that out there. It's at the bottom of this list for a reason. I didn't really like the plot. I didn't really like the characters. It just felt like a basic 20th century book, but also not a classic because it's not good enough to be a classic. So it's just, I don't know how to explain it, but like the only thing I did actually like about this book was that it's very good at depicting the Latvian countryside and how beautiful it is, and that I will say was very nice. I really enjoyed reading about how beautiful the countryside is and this how perfect it is, because it's basically perfect. It's just nature and nothing else, and I love that, and it's very picturesque and ideal. The second book is Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast, Oscar Wilde. So this is the most pretentious thing I've ever read in my entire life. This book is the silliest thing ever, because it's not even a book. It's just full of one or two sentence quotes like "marriage is stupid, man must never marry," or something like that. And it's just like, it was funny occasionally, I will say that. Like, Oscar Wilde is very witty. It is very funny to read some of the things, especially because he makes fun of British people a lot, which I thought that was really funny. I enjoyed that. But everything else, sometimes I would just feel like an eye roll. Sometimes he'd say something like, "Only great men must make mistakes," or something like that. And it's just like, oh my God, please, enough is enough. Enough. Sometimes you don't have to say everything, but he did say that one must always carry their journal around with them on vacation, because it's very nice to read something entertaining on your train ride. And I was just like, yeah, that's so me. Like, that's me when I'm sitting on a plane and just reading my notes app. Maybe I am as pretentious as Oscar Wilde, guys. Like, this is not even funny. Like, he called me out on that one, let me just say. The Bluegrass Summer, I'm pretty sure that's what this book is called in English. I had never heard of this book before, never seen it, and I read some other people's reviews of the book on Goodreads, and they agreed that this was like a mystery book, mostly because it's a Dutch book written by Dutch authors, so that's probably the reason why. It's really hard to find out about international books unless they become huge bestsellers. You know what I mean? Like, each country has their little publishing industry. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but every country has their own books, and we just don't really find out about them, which is, I think it's quite sad. However, in this book's case, I see why I didn't find out about it, because it wasn't really good. It tells a story about these young two boys. One of them is Norwegian, the other one is Dutch. And they meet at this summer camp in the US. And it's a queer love story, but there was this point where it just stopped making sense to me. Like, I think there was something a bit wrong with the pacing, because as I was reading it, it made sense at first when they're at the camp, but then something happens and they leave the camp, and then it's like, there was just something really wrong with the pacing. Like, I thought they were going to spend the whole book at the camp, but then they didn't. And I got really, really lost. I was like, why is this still going on? It's a really short book, but there was this point and I was like, how is this short ass book feeling as if it's like 300 pages long? Like, it's just like, it wasn't a bad book, but it was just, I think there was something off with the pacing. Sometimes it was a bit illogical. Sometimes it was a bit dramatic. I wasn't a big fan of this. But I had never read a book by a Dutch author before, so that was something new. Continuing on the list of disappointments, we have Almond. There is literally nothing more annoying to me than when there's a book which I think will be so good and so amazing, and then I read it and I'm like, fuck, this had so much potential, and you just ruined it like that. Why? And this is what Almond is to me. The protagonist of this book is a young boy who has a brain condition, which makes it hard for him to feel emotions like fear and anger. And I thought that was such an interesting concept, and I was so excited to read about it. And the start of the book, I actually really liked. Like the first, I'd say even like the first third of the book I really liked. But then around the middle, I was just not feeling it anymore. Nothing was really happening. And they also brought in this one character, which I felt was just a useless addition. And the end of the book was nice, but like, I'm really trying not to give you spoilers about this book, but it's really hard for me to actually explain why I don't really like it. It wasn't a bad book though. Like, I see why some people would like it, but I just like, I guess I just expected something else from it, and that's why. This is Girls, Emma Klein. I'm not a very big fan of cult books, novels, books about cults, and I know some people are, but once in a while, I think it's a great idea to read a book about a cult, and this is just it. I think this is a pretty famous book about a cult. It's a novel, and it's set in the 60s, 70s, which is the perfect time to write a book about a cult, because like it's like hippies walking around barefoot. It's just like perfect. I mean, it's not so perfect since it's still a cult book, which means it's still like low-key creepy and low-key concerning, but at least it has like the vibe of like, maybe it was the 60s or whatever that stupid fucking TikTok sound is.
Maybe I was just crazy. Maybe it was the 60s. Or maybe I was just a girl.
But yeah, it tells the story of a young American girl getting lured into a cult. And it was just okay. I have no emotions about this book, genuinely. Like, this is the perfect 3.5 star read, I'd say. Like, I'm not in love with this book, but I don't hate it. I have no beef with this book, you know? Like, I don't mind. We enter another disappointment. This was Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, and I just can't. I just can't. I expected to love this book so much. I thought this was going to be a great book. I was expecting to be like, yeah, this is going to be my favorite book. And I started reading it, and I was like, first of all, I like to say that this book is really interesting language, since English wasn't his first language, if I'm not wrong, I'm pretty sure. And he uses English in a very, very interesting way. I'm just going to tell you guys, he used a lot of words I did not understand. Like, there was a point when I was reading, I was like, what is he saying, guys? I don't want to pull out the dictionary for this one, but like, what is he saying? Once again, I felt like there was so much potential for this book. There's this part in the book where they enter a road trip, and he just starts driving around into different places. And this is one of my least favorite things in a book. I really don't like when it's just, oh, we went there, and then we went there, and then we went there. I don't care. I do not care. I don't care. But I would say that the main character is a very interesting character to analyze. If I would have to analyze him, I think that would be quite an experience, because he is a villain, but then again, he's not a villain, because he's self-aware, but he's not self-aware. He's extremely paranoid, but he's also like, it's a really strange book. I'm going to tell you that, but I guess that's why it's a classic, low-key. I think that might be one of the reasons. It's just, It's just very different from anything I've ever read before. However, I do feel like it was too long. I felt like it was dragging in the road trip parts, and that's just the part I just can't. I don't like that part. Women Don't Owe You Pretty. I read the little petite version of this book in like 2 days or something. It was a very quick read. I do think this is more targeted towards millennials and not me. I think another important factor is that I'm quite young and I live in the scene of like social media. So most of the things that this book touched upon, I had already heard on social media because I'm just interested in the topic. So I just know things and I like research them a lot and I've read other books. So like this wasn't very impressive and new to me, but I do see how maybe someone who's in their like 30s, like mid 30s, this would be more of like a important read. I often read books and just think about that. Maybe it's not that the book is bad, but it's just that I'm not the target audience. And I think this is one of those cases. Anxious People. I'm going to tell you instantly that the only reason why I actually got this book was because I found it in a Latvian bookstore and it was in Latvian. But for some reason, there was like a huge, huge sale specifically on this book. They were selling it for €6. A steal. So, of course, purchased instantly. Literally, the moment I saw, I was like, yep, I'm getting that €6. Yes, of course. If I can get a discount, I will get a discount. I thought this book was very wholesome. It's a very cute book. It's about a bank robbery which goes completely wrong and forces the main character to get introduced to this group of people who are also unique and also nice. I found it very nice and it was very funny. It's the same author who wrote A Man Called Uwe, and his books are always very, very, very funny, very wholesome, very cute. So I think this is like a very nice, like wholesome read. Fourth Wing. I have said this many times before and I'll say it again. I don't really read fantasy books. That's just not a genre I tend to read. However, I do enjoy occasionally picking up a book that I know will just like make me so interested in it and so invested in the story that I won't be able to put it down. I love that feeling. I think that's very nice when you just can't put the book down. And I had that with this book. I read it like very quickly, although it's a pretty fucking long book, honestly, guys. Like, bear with me, guys. I'm really, really bad at describing the plots of like fantasy books because I never do that. So just give me a moment here, okay? Just give me a moment. We will figure this out together. The main character, her name is Violet Sorengale. And because this is a fantasy book, I'm not going to say anyone else's name because I have no idea how to pronounce them. I don't know. I do not know. Like, why are they all spelled so weirdly, guys? This is for all the fantasy book authors. Can we please, I don't know, just like before the book, can we please make a little note of how you read out their names? Because I have no fucking clue. At least her name is Violet, so I know it probably is pronounced like Violet, I hope. Because every other name is like, when Takaris and me and Clitermion went to the store. I was like, what the fuck are you saying? I don't understand. So, the main character of the book is Violet Sorengale. And she thought that she was going to study to be a scribe, which are basically these like very smart people. Good description, I know. And she thought she was going to spend her whole life in libraries and researching things. Until her mother, who is, by the way, a general, forced her to become a dragon rider. You see why I don't read a lot of fantasy books? Like, imagine if I would read only fantasy and then have to describe every single fucking book like that. No, there is a reason why. Because I'm like, no, you see how bad I am at this? The last thing I want to say about Fourth Wing is that it low-key felt more like a romance book than a fantasy book. There's a lot of fantasy books which have a romance subplot. This book felt like it was a romance book with a fantasy subplot. I guess that makes it perfect for a TikTok book because all the TikTok girlies who love romance and fantasy collide together, and that's why it's so famous. But overall, it was a pretty good book, you know? The world building was very impressive. Like, hello, dragons, guys. Do you not want to read about dragons? Dead Poets Society. This is the iconic Dead Poets Society, and I will instantly just say that no need to read this book. No need. Just watch the movie. No, don't waste your money on this. I borrowed it from a friend. I didn't waste my money. Don't. No need. And I'm just going to use this time to talk about the movie because I love the movie. So I think the movie is a cinematic masterpiece. I love it. I think it's extremely well done. I love the role poetry and self-expression play in this movie in the 1950s, this private boarding school, and the conformity of it clashing with the freedom the young men feel when they read poetry and when they write and when they perform. I think it's very beautiful. I think it's a very touching story, and I think you should watch the movie if you haven't seen it, and do not read this book. Thank you. Because I'm pretty sure the book was actually written after the movie, which I didn't really look this up, but like, I'm pretty sure. Like, I don't actually know. I think this was just like a money grab. Like, I don't understand why I don't know. Guys, please someone explain in the comments. I'm too, like, stupid for this. Like, I can't. Kafka on the Shore, Murakami. This was my first time reading Murakami, and it went exactly as I thought it would go. Like, the mysticism of it was just exactly what I expected. That's what everyone ever talks about when discussing Murakami, so I wasn't very shocked while reading it, because I basically knew what was going to happen. But I have a very weird relationship with Murakami and this book specifically because I don't understand how to feel about it. Like, I'm not exactly sure if I like it, if I don't like it. That's why it's just in the middle of this list, because I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. I find it really, really hard to describe my feelings about this book. That's why I'm just going to leave it here. However, we are finally entering the part where the books get actually good and where I actually really enjoy them. So let's get into that. I'm really excited. We're done with all the flops. We're done with all the disappointments. We're done with all the flops. Now it's only the good shit, okay? Only the good shit left. Let's get into it. Blue Sisters, Coco Malors. This is the new book everyone has been talking about this summer, or at least I've been hearing about it, like, everywhere. I think Coco Malors did a great job with this book. I read Cleopatra and Frankenstein and I didn't really like it. I had felt like that book was a bit too messy and it didn't really have an objective. And I think Coco Malors has really perfected her craft. This book is really similar in themes to Cleopatra and Frankenstein, but it's just that the writing and the storytelling is genuinely better. This book has a set, defined purpose and goal, which is very different from her previous work. So I'm really happy. Thank you, Coco Malors, for this amazing book. The story of this book is about three sisters who live in three separate parts of the world and are each trying to deal with the loss of their fourth sister. And then, inevitably, they're all forced to meet in New York, which is where they all grew up. And it's a really, really cute story of loss, grief, addiction, family, queerness, sisterhood, literally everything. And I have almost no issues with this book, except one, which is that sometimes when you read it, there's just a strong feeling that Coco Malors was just like sitting there with like Pinterest open and trying to like make her characters as aesthetic as possible, because I'm not joking right now. I'm not joking. There is a part in the book that goes, I ran in my pajamas through Le Marais in Paris, taking a drag of my Marlboro Gold. And it's like, girl, what is this romanticization? Like, we don't need, like, it's nice, but sometimes it just didn't feel natural. It's like, are you just trying to be extremely aesthetic or like what? Or like what? But then again, she's so real for that, because if I would write a book, I'd do the same thing. Like, I do the exact same thing. Like, it's not even funny. Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. She is one of those authors who can write a book in any genre and she'll do it so masterfully that I'll be completely obsessed with it. Like, are you trying to tell me that she wrote a fantasy, dark academia novel about colonization and linguistics? And then she just pulls up with this literary fiction, like contemporary fiction book about the publishing industry. Like, how can you be so versatile and so good at everything you do? This is crazy. Like, I absolutely love her. I think she's an incredible author. And Yellowface is the funniest book to ever exist, Loki. The dark humor in this book, perfect. I also really highly value her ability to create these characters who are innately flawed, and we understand that, but we still feel for them. And this book also has an unreliable narrator. You basically don't understand if you're even allowed. If the whole book is literally just you being like, is the main character a bitch, an asshole? Are we sad for them? Are they the victim or are they not? Because you know that they're not. Then you're like, wait, but Loki, I feel sad for them. But then you don't. I love that. I love that. I love when the author puts me through like emotional turmoil. I love that. I'm just like, how do I feel about this? How do I even feel about this? And reading about the publishing industry is just so interesting. And I love getting to know more about it. It's just so like, like you get to, it's a book for people who like books because you get to find out how they're created. It's amazing. Sally Rooney, Conversations with Friends. Loki, I don't think it matters what she writes anymore because it will always end up just so delicious. Like, it's just tasty. Her writing is amazing. Her books are always so realistic with such detail that you can't even doubt if the characters are real like they are. Like, what do you mean they're not real? Conversations with Friends is a novel where two best friends develop a very strange relationship with a married couple. It also has queer characters in it. They're studying at the Trinity College of Dublin, which almost all Sally Rooney books, I'm pretty sure, take place in Dublin, which I love because I love Dublin, and Trinity College is just so aesthetic. Like imagine you're reading it and you just imagine them in like the sexy library. Like, hello. Greta and Walden is a very authentic novel. I don't think I've read anything quite like this. It's about two siblings navigating queerness, complicated family relationships, multiracial identity, complex history, and of course, a lot of drama. It's so interesting to read about the complex family dynamic because I feel like I have a complex family like dynamic. But then I read this and I'm like, never mind. Mine is so like easy to understand. Like, this one is a complicated one because genuinely it took me 100 pages to actually understand who is who. I really enjoyed how diverse this novel is. It also takes place in New Zealand, which I don't think I've ever read a single book that takes place in New Zealand. And I'm always a really big fan of novels that have these witty characters who know all sorts of like pop culture references. The Girl with the Louding Voice, I personally consider to be essential literature which should be read in all schools. It tells the story of a 14-year-old girl growing up in Nigeria whose biggest dream is to get an education and become a teacher so she could educate other kids. However, this dream could not feel more far from her as she's forced to get married at the age of 14 and live her life out as a bride without no education until an incident occurs and she is forced to flee to Lagos, where she is determined to fight for her voice. I think this is the perfect book to read in schools. I don't understand why it's not read in schools because I feel like it should be. It's just such a touching story of this young girl learning things and being faced with the unfairness of life and just being like, wait, why is that? Why is it so unfair? Why is it like that? It shouldn't be like that. And then you're just sitting there and reading it. You're like, yeah, she's right. It should not be like that. She's very much right. Like, what the fuck? And I definitely learned a lot of things about Nigeria because before this book, it was like, I know the capital. So yeah, I enjoyed this book quite a lot. It was a very nice read. Prophet Song, Paul Lynch. This book, I'm pretty sure, is the winner of the Booker Prize. And I think it's well deserved. I see why it is the winner. And just by the way, guys, yesterday I literally spoke to myself about this book for about 40 minutes because I'm a bit crazy. But that's just like extra information, you know what I mean? Like, this book portrays what a totalitarian regime would look like in modern day Ireland, which, I mean, first of all, this idea is absolutely brilliant. What can I say? It has a very clear purpose and goal. It wants to depict what would war and totalitarianism look like in a modern Western society. And I'm such a big fan of this idea, exactly for the reason that I think we don't often realize how privileged we are to not be living in this constant state of war or just under the surveillance of strict governments. Because, well, I'm from Eastern Europe, not from Western Europe, but especially in Western Europe, I feel like everything feels very far. Sometimes people are just so far removed from where wars are actually happening that it doesn't feel important. And what I like the most about this book, that it has a lot of feelings of like, how could this be happening to us? We live in like a civil society. How could this happen to us? This doesn't happen to us. And then it just does. And then you just watch like Ireland, which is like a very like, it seems like a very Western stable country, and you just watch it collapse into madness. And it's like, wow, this is so fascinating to watch, like a Western European country under totalitarianism. Because when was the last time that happened? The last time any country in Western Europe was under like a totalitarian regime was in like what, 1975, like Franco's Spain. Like was that not? I'm pretty sure that was the last time, but I don't know. Like, it's full of horrors. It's quite a gruesome book. It has the horrors of war and suffering and pain in it. So maybe don't read it if you're very sensitive. There's this specific part in the book that I was not ready for it. I did not expect something so crazy to happen. And my jaw was on the ground, and I don't think I will ever recover. So if anyone has read this book and wants to discuss with me what that part is, you're free to do that. But my jaw was on the ground. I was disturbed, very disturbed. So please read like the fucking trigger warnings. That's what they're called, trigger warnings. Read the trigger warnings, guys. And the writing style is so interesting in this book because there's no paragraphs. It's just spilling out, it makes the suspense even worse because you're just not prepared for anything that happens. But that's so realistic. Yeah, this was a very good book. I'm happy to announce that we're entering the top 3. Finally, after a very long time. And we're going to start with Soviet Milk by Nora Ikstena, which is my favorite Latvian book I have ever read. I've been wanting to read this book for a very, very long time, and I knew I was going to love it, and I did. It tells the story of 3 generations of Latvian women living in Soviet Latvia. It is quite biographical and basically draws all of its inspirations from the author's life, which makes the story extremely accurate and feel very, very real since it's literally what the author herself went through. It's a story of repression and loss and, of course, freedom, which is one of the most important aspects of the book because it discusses the build-up to Latvia declaring its independence, basically. And the state of Latvia under communism plays a really big part in the relationship between mother and daughter because one of them is from an older generation, so she still like remembers what it was like to live in the independent Latvia, then the other one doesn't. And the youngest daughter, she has basically just been completely like, she's convinced communism is like the best thing ever and that like this is key to the world. And then you just watch her grow up and learn what even is going on in the country and how they're getting controlled. And it's just a fascinating book. I love this book. I love the history in this book. I love the little details. I love the writing style. And it's just like, oh my god, this is the best book. Like, if anyone ever wants to read a book by a Latvian author, this is it. This is the best book you can physically read. Like, this is the best one out there. That's it, guys. Book number 2. This is Love in the Big City. This book is number 2 for me, but I do think other people wouldn't like it as much, but I just feel like this was a match made in heaven. Like, this book was meant for me. It was just meant for me, and I loved it. So this is a pretty biographical book, and it takes us to Seoul, where the queer protagonist explores his relationship with his mother, his best friend, his Tinder matches, and perhaps the love of his life. This book is the perfect depiction of how early adulthood feels. And I say this as someone who like has not been an adult, but I feel like this is how people in their like late 20s and like early 30s feel. This book is uncertain of what it is, and I absolutely love that. It doesn't it's not sure if the love of your life was in the previous chapter, or if it's just approaching, or if you've already said your goodbyes. It's not sure if your best friend and you will ever talk again, or if you've grown out of talking to each other. And it's just so beautiful. I just love this book. It's just amazing. And here is a quote from this book, because I found quotes for my 2 favorite books of the summer. The quote I chose for this one is, "If obsession isn't love, I have never loved." What can I say? What can I say? This book is just it. It's the it girl. That's it. And speaking of another it girl, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Yes! This is literally the best book I have ever read. This is my favorite classic I have ever read, to be more specific. Sometimes I find reading classics quite intimidating because, first of all, as someone who English isn't the first language to, sometimes classics are very complicated, and sometimes I don't understand the words that they use, the language, or sometimes it's just like presumed that classics are boring. But this book is literally none of that. This book is the best classic I've ever read. It's really easy to understand, but the language is still so meticulous and so beautiful, and I'm actually in love with everything Daphne du Maurier has written in this book. It's flawless in my eyes. In my eyes, this book is flawless. The atmosphere is so dark and twisted and sometimes almost scary. If anyone needs even more like convincing that this is like an amazing book and you should read it, it's very dark academia. So I'm just gonna put that out there. I mean, it's a gothic novel, so like, just so you know, guys, you just know that it's amazing. If it's a gothic novel, then you know it's amazing. Rebecca tells the story of an anonymous narrator who is a young woman, and she marries Mr. De Winter, a wealthy man with a famous house called Manderley. The whole book is the protagonist being haunted by Rebecca, the previous, now dead wife of Mr. De Winter. And the tension in this book is deadly. You're sitting there and you're terrified. The protagonist feels like an absolute stranger in Manderley. And it's so interesting to read this. And something even more fascinating to me is how she's very young and she's very unsure of herself. She's still very naive and she's very scared. And she walks around the house and she has people looking at her and comparing her to his past wife, Rebecca. And she just feels so insecure. The characters Daphne du Maurier has crafted in this book are wow. And one of my favorite parts of this whole book was reading about the countryside of England, and specifically Cornwall, because it's so detailed. Like, when you read this, you can feel how much Daphne du Maurier loves Cornwall and how much she loves to live there and write there, because it's so vivid and so beautiful, and the descriptions of the nature, like every tree and every plant and the fucking like oceans and like literally everything. I couldn't recommend this book enough. And because I love it so much, I also picked 2 quotes for it. The first quote, which is, I'm pretty sure this is the opening line of the book, which, if it is, jaw on the ground. "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again." Best start of the book ever. And the second quote was, "I'm glad it cannot happen twice, the fever of first love, for it is a fever, and a burden too, whatever the poets may say." She cooked that. Honestly, guys, she cooked that. I love Daphne du Maurier. I loved Rebecca, and that is it. This is it for the video. Thank you for watching this video if you watched it this far. Thank you for being here. And recommend me some books, guys. Recommend me something. Say something. And I'll see you some other time. Bye.